Welcome back. In this video, we're going to finalize the notification feature and pretty much finalize the application, even though there is still a lot potentially to do. So we still have the functionality, for example, to delete a user from the members list, or there are so many different things. You can definitely extend the application to your liking now. This is just the beginning, of course. If you look at complex and fully fledged project management tools, they have a lot of more features, but basically all of them, or most of them at least, build up on things that you have learned so far. All right, so by the time that you have gotten this far, you should be able to add all of those features to your application. But for now, the last thing that I want to show you is how to add a notification to display it inside of the user's phone. So I'm testing it right now. I have the application installed on my phone, so I'm going to create a new board, which I'm gonna call notifications test board. All right, let's create it, and then I will assign a member to it, which will be the member who uses this emulator, okay, who is logged in into this emulator. Let me add that, and we can see a little icon here at the top popped up. Let's look at it, and we can see assigned to the board notification test board. You have been assigned to the new board by Frank. Okay, so Frank is the user that I logged in with on the application, or in the application on my phone, and that's exactly what I'm now getting here. All right, so now I can click on this, and that will send me over to the Projet Manage application. And that is pretty much it. So that is the notification that I wanted to show you. And now let's get into it. And by the way, if you want to learn more about push notifications using Firebase and advanced REST client, then I can recommend this link. So here are a bunch of explanations what's going on. So here, for example, the notification you can see here, small icon is number one, then this required a set with small icon, then app name, then timestamp, which is now large icon, which is this icon here, the title, and the text. Okay, so all of that is explained in this article. Also the difference between notification and data messages, and then the code as well, even though it is Java code, but you can really easily apply that to Kotlin as well. Okay, so we're going to build some of the stuff that you can see here in this video. By the way, he uses an advanced REST client in order to trigger the event. So there are multiple ways, of course, how you could do a notification. One is from a server side, one is from a client side, and we are not going to do the feature where you actually get triggered a notification if the timer runs up. So for example, we have due dates, right? But those due dates, they currently don't really represent anything in the application, though they're just a date there. Of course, you could implement the feature where the user gets a notification if the due date is coming. So let's say a day before the due date, or maybe a week before the due date. But that would require for you to set up this whole functionality in the backend. So this cannot just be done by the application itself, okay? So this is why we are going to keep it simple. We are not looking into backend. We are just going to add the feature that once you add a user to a board, that user gets a notification on his phone. And I think this is already good enough, and this is already going to teach you the important basics of that. Of course, when it comes to anything that you learn here, you'll find something in the documentation about it as well. All right, so you can check out the notification there. Things are explained as well, with also the same image that you see here with some explanations, and expanded notification if you ever need that, and so forth. So if you want to create your very own notifications, there are a lot of settings that you can set up. Okay, I'm just going to show you one way of doing it. Of course, there are plenty of ways of doing it and things to consider, and also things to consider when working with different versions of Android and so forth. All right, but now let's get into coding. So the thing is, we are going to require quite some constants here, which we will need for the notification. Okay, so I'm just gonna paste them in here and go over them real quick. So we will need the base URL. This is the FCM base URL if you want to send something. Then the FCM authorization, which is going to be a string that we call like that. The FCM key, which we're just going to call key. The FCM server key, to which you need to use your own server key here. Then the title, the message, the data, and the string for the key to. Okay, so we have a bunch of keys that we need, and then we will assign data to that key. So as you saw earlier, we need a title, we need a message, and then we need the data and who we want to send it to. Now, if you might wonder where to get the FCM server key from, well, you can Google that, by the way. Just Google, find your FCM sender key and server key, and then you will find that you need to go to your project settings, and there under cloud messaging, you will find your server key. All right, so here on the cloud, you can get your server key. Okay, so if you download my code, then of course you want to replace this server key that you have there. Alrighty. The next step that we will need to take is to create an async task inside of our members activity, because that's where I want to trigger this whole thing, right? So once we go to the members activity and we add a new member, that member should be notified. Okay, so let's go over there. Let's go to the activities here and then members activity. And I'm just going to create an async task at the very bottom here, an inner class this time, so that I can use it inside of this members activity. So private inner class send notification to user async task, which should be an async task of any void and string. And then of course we need to implement its members. So let's do that. So here, implement members, and there's only the do in background. What I'm also going to add is the on pre-execute. So on pre-execute, in which I'm just going to show the progress dialog. Nothing too fancy. Just before we do that, we want to show the progress dialog, and after we do that, so the on post execute, pretty much we want to hide the progress dialog. So on post execute hide progress dialog. All right, if you want to see what kind of JSON log you got there, you can of course also use the log with the result of that post execute. But now let's implement the do in background. Okay, so this is where the magic happens, and this is where a lot is going to happen, because we need to take care of a lot of things here. So first of all, we will need a variable, which will be our result, which will be a string. And then we will return just result at the end. So that's the idea. Okay. But now, of course, result is empty and we need to initialize it. But in order to initialize it, we need to prepare some more things. So here we need a connection first, which will be an HTTP URL connection, which I'm going to assign null to for now. It's going to be a nullable. And then what we try to do is to set a URL based on constants dot FCM base URL. Okay, so use this constant that we prepared, which is this base URL here, FCM send Google APIs.com send, and then we need to import URL for that, of course, and it's going to be the JavaNet. And then we can use our connection up here to open this URL. So here connection is going to be url.open connection as an HTTP URL connection. All right, then we can assign some settings to this connection. So do we want to do output? Yes. Do we want to do input as well? Do input, let's set that to true as well. Then we can add another setting to it, which is instance follow redirects, and I'm going to set that to false. So this sets whether the HTTP redirect should be automatically followed by this instance, and the default value comes from the follow redirects, which defaults to true. So that's why we need to specifically set that to false if we don't want to redirect. And then we can set the request method for this connection. And I'm just going to say I want to do a post request. So I'm sending information over to the server. So before we used GET requests to get data when we worked with JSON and other APIs, but this time we are actually sending data because we want to send the notification to the server so that the server then notifies the user's application that it should trigger something, or his phone that it should trigger a notification. Okay, so we're posting, or we're using this post request to post something. And then we need to set the request properties of that connection. Okay, and I'm just gonna paste those 3 settings that we need to give it here because they are always pretty much the same. So we set the request property to content type, and there the value is the application slash JSON. So we send the data as JSON. Then we say that the char set, the character set, should be UTF-8. So it just tells the server of which type of data the characters will be. There are multiple different sets. UTF-8 is the most common one, and it contains a lot of different characters. So that's basically the idea here behind this UTF-8. Then set request property is accept with application JSON. All right, so we have those 3 here, and this will allow us to pretty much set post requests. Okay, so these are the default settings, which are pretty much always the same. Now comes the one that we need to use in order to set the right authorization and everything. Okay, so set request property with constants.fcm underscore authorization. So what is FCM authorization? Well, it's the key, or this, FCM key authorization. But now what is the string that we want to pass to it? Well, it is our constants.fcm key is equal to constants. So here again, constants dot FCM underscore server key. Okay, so basically we're sending something like FCM key should be the server key that we have here. So that's the link that we have here. Okay, so we need to pass that as information to the FCM authorization key. So basically set request property always has a key and a value. All right, and the key is the FCM authorization, which we had, which is just the value, the string authorization. And then the value is a combination of the key and the server key. So basically saying key equals and then whatever we have in here. Okay, so this whole part here pretty much set in there. Okay, so this is the information that we're sending over, or pretty much setting as our request properties for the connection. So you can see we need to set up a lot of settings before we can start the actual sending. Then another setting that I want to assign is uses caches, and I'm going to set that to false. So the default comes from default uses caches, which defaults to true, but I don't want to use any caches here. So now that we have all of that, we can go ahead and prepare a output stream of data because we're sending data over, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use a data output stream, and I'm going to call this WR, which stands for writer. So I'm going to use that here, connection dot output stream. Of course, you can give it a more meaningful name than what I've used here. So output is one word, so you can put it together. So data output stream, Then I will create a JSON request, which will be a JSON object. Okay, so I create a new JSON object. Then I have a data object, which will also be a JSON object. And now I'm going to add information to this data object. So you can do that via put. So I will put something at the position constants.fcm underscore key underscore title. So this is the title key, so to speak. So what should be the title that the user sees when he opens up his notification? Well, I'm just gonna say something like assigned to the board, and then let's just use the board name. And now you might wonder, where does the board name come from? Well, I want to get that once somebody creates an object of this notification task. Okay, so I want to have the board name, which is going to be a string. And then I also want to get a token, because I'm going to need the token here as well, which is also going to be a string. So here val board name and val token. Okay, so the board name is used now. We use it when we want to write the title of the notification. And then I want to also have the message. So put constants dot fcm underscore key message, and that should be you have been assigned to the new board, or maybe just to the board by, and then the user. All right, so here the username will be m assigned members list at the position 0 dot name. So this is the assigner, so to speak, so the creator of the board, and we've been assigned to it by the creator. So assigned to the board by the creator. Okay, and now we can go ahead and add that to the JSON request. So we just prepared a JSON object here. This data object just contains this information, and now we can put that data object to the JSON request. So we're just gonna say put the constants dot fcm key data to be the data object. All right, so that's the structure here. And then we also need to pass in the token. So put constants dot fcm key to, which is this one here, and the token. So that is what we are putting in there. And now at this point we need to use our writer here. So use vr.writeBytes, not boolean but bytes, write bytes, with our JSON request to string. So now we make a string out of our JSON request so that the bytes can be written, and then we flush the writer and we close the writer. As we are sending something to a server, things can go wrong, right? So I want to get the HTTP result code. So HTTP result, which will be an integer, and it will be connection dot response code. So whatever the response code is, let's say it's 200, then we know, okay, everything is fine. We got the data. If it's 404, for example, then file not found, for example, and so forth, or URL not found, or whatever I'm trying to do there. So now I'm checking if the request code is HTTP URL connection dot HTTP, and you can see these are the different codes there are. Okay, response codes. So these are just integers, as you see. So it's constants. For example, the one that I want to have is HTTP OK, and if you look at it, it's the value 200. So then you can check out this file here, HTTP URL connection.java. You'll find the status codes here, 201 created, 202 accepted, and so forth. So everything with the 2 is a rather positive one, with the 3 is more of a redirect thing, and everything with the 4 is just didn't work. So 400 is bad request, no internet connection, and so forth. Yep. So that's the HTTP URL connection. Now let's look what we want to do if that works out. So what I want to do is I want to have an input stream that reads from this connection. So val input stream that goes and says connection.input stream, and then we create a reader based on that, but this time it's a buffered reader with the input stream reader input stream. Okay, so we need to pass all of this information to the reader so that it can do its magic. And then we need a string builder. So what it will do is it will create a string out of whatever is given to it. So string builder var line string. So we've worked with readers and input streams and so forth, right? So what it basically does is it gives us the details line by line. And as these things can go wrong, we're going to have a try and catch here. So what I'll try to do is to read every single line. I'm just going to say while reader dot read line. So this will be called as long as there are things to read and the line is equal IT. Just go ahead and append the string builder. So here, this should be inside of curly brackets, do as b append the current line with a line break. So here I'm just going to use a line break also with \n. And by the way, this may not be null here. So the line should not be null. All right, and now let's catch what should happen if something went wrong. So usually we would get an IO exception, so an input output exception. And let's just print the stack trace for that. And then finally, I will try to close the connection. So here try input stream dot close. Okay, because we opened up an input stream and they should never stay open. So I'm trying to close it. Usually that should work. And then if something went wrong, then let's just have an IO exception here as well, because that's one of the exceptions that can arise. You can of course also use a default exception here. All right, and then at this point, so after this finally block, it's where we can set the result to be sb.toString. And else, by the way, so here in this else block, and that is our if statement with the HTTP result. Okay, so if we had a good result, that's cool. Then let's do all of this magic. But if we didn't get a good result, what should we do then? Well, I'm just gonna set the result to be connection.response message. So whatever the response message is for us, I will use that. Okay, and then this whole thing here, this whole connection part where we try to even establish the connection and everything else is inside of a try block, right? So we are still missing the catch block. You can see this is quite some code that we need here just for this notification, and that is only in the async task class, and we still have the other class which we need to adjust. So here catch, and we can have multiple different errors here. So it's going to be a socket timeout exception that could arise, timeout exception, and in that case I'm just gonna set the result to connection timeout then we can have a default exception, in which case I'm just gonna set the result to error with the e.message, so the error message, the exception message, so to speak. And then finally, in either way, I want to check the connection, and if it exists, then disconnect, because you don't want to keep a connection open that results in a bunch of errors and unwanted behavior. Okay, and then for this video, I will just do one more thing, and that is to go to our function where we create the members, or what we just say, member assign success. So here, when we have successfully assigned a member, that's where I want to send the notification. So here I'm going to say send notification to user async task. I need to pass in the board details and the token. Okay, so these are the two things that I need to pass in here. And by the way, it's not the board details themselves, it's just the name of the user who is assigned to the, or of the board detail. And then the token, we get that from the FCM token. So user.fcm token, if you look at it, the user object has the statement here, FCM token. So we need the FCM token of the specific user here. And then we need to execute that async task. So dot execute. And that's it for this video. Because we didn't do any Firebase magic yet, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. So here you can see send registration to server needs to be implemented and so forth. So I'd say let's have a break here. This video is long enough. See you in the next video, where we are going to finally finish this feature, and then you have a fully working, pretty cool app. So see you there.